I want to talk to you tonight about encounters that lead to restoration. Encounters that lead to restoration. This will be the least dramatic of all the encounters in this series because God himself is talked about, but he actually doesn't appear, but he's in the midst. And it's the life of King David. And I want to give you just a little bit of background before I read the first 8 verses of 1 Samuel 30. David is in a long season of backsliddenness. People, when they think of David's, blowouts in life, they think of Bathsheba, and then some people remember that he took a census near the end of his life that God was very upset with him about doing because it seemed to speak of David's pride and what he had accomplished. But in this passage, David has been literally living in the enemy territory in agreement with an enemy king for about 18 months. He has been chased away from Jerusalem. King Saul had put such a heavy bounty out on David's life, and David had been driven away from his home. King Saul's daughter, Michal, had been David's wife, and she had been taken away from David and given to another man, so he had lost his wife. And in the meantime, David was trying to figure out how to make a life for himself, how to survive, and then how to prosper. And this, you can read the earlier chapters, but he's gone through about 18 months where he doesn't feel like he knows what to do spiritually, so he just starts living his life. And he's basically, he's kind of a renegade guy, a mercenary who's working for King Achish. And he is going out, and he's got him a little army of about, I think, 400 men, something around there, that have come to David. They were living in a cave for a little while. And then this pagan king says, hey, we got this city up here called Ziklag. Why don't you and you guys, you just go up there and take Ziklag and y'all can live there. So David has really started learning how to live outside of the will of God. And it's about an 16 to 18 month period of being outside of the will of God. And here's what's interesting. David's actually making bank. He's going out and he's doing these little mercenary war tours, and he's getting lots of spoil. He's getting lots of money. He's building camaraderie with his guys that will become his mighty men. They've got their wives with them now and some of their kids, and they've got this city that they didn't have to pay for. And so on the outside, David might have been tempted to say, well, if I was out of the will of God, I don't see any evidence of it. I wish I was back in Jerusalem. I wish I'm anointed to be the king, but God's not making that happen. So I guess I'm going to do my thing. And for many months, it goes on uninterrupted. But how many of you learned, just theoretically, because I know none of y'all have ever gotten in a season where you've departed 1 inch for 1 moment out of the will of God, but theoretically, and for the people on the podcast, so for those folks, not y'all, how many of you would theoretically know that God doesn't allow you to live open-endedly outside of his will? He will, in love, it doesn't necessarily feel like love, as we're going to see, but in love, he will wreck your self-made world because he doesn't want you to be self-made. He wants you to be God-dependent. He wants to make a life for you. And so that's what this passage is all about. And David's going to have an encounter with God that's going to, in a very short time, cause him to lose everything. And then God's going to restore everything. And he's going to do it in a matter of about 18 verses. 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 1, it says this. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day, the Amalekites had made a raid against the Negeb and against Ziklag. They had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire, and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed no one, but carried them off and went their way. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's 2 wives also had been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David was greatly distressed, watch this, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David, here's the encounter. It's very subtle, but here it is. David strengthened himself. King James, that's where I learned it. He encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David, and David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue after this band? Shall I overtake them? God answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue. Now, guys, this is the kind of encounter that can often go unnoticed, because when we think of encounters with God, we think of fire, we think of angels, we think of the earthquake, the wind, the flame. We think of God's bellowing voice and Jesus being transfigured and people falling on their faces. And we think of the supernatural. And let me just tell you, sometimes when God manifests, it can be any or all of those things. But I don't want you to ever think that you've not encountered God because you haven't had something on the 10 out of 10 scale in the dramatic and supernatural. While we were praying earlier this evening, and one of the young ladies in the prayer group prayed this. She said, Lord, we're not chasing the supernatural. Lord, we're being chased by you. And I thought, she's like 20 years old, and I thought to myself, amen, sister. We're not chasing the supernatural. We're being chased by God. But here's the thing. Sometimes you're in the presence of the Lord, and you may not recognize it because it's not all neon and flashy and amazing and stunning. David was forced by difficulty to press into an encounter with God, and God met him there. And so let's look at this tonight, and let's talk about encounters that lead to restoration. And I'm going to start off, and it's a little bit gloomy at the beginning. Bear with me. I know, everybody could use some encouragement. We're going to get there, but let's start off with what I'm calling David reaps what he has sown. Y'all know that principle in Scripture, you reap what you sow. Some of y'all heard that growing up. You didn't know it was Bible. It's Bible. That whatever we sow, we reap. So when it talks about sowing, it talks about planting seed. So here's a little audience participation. If you plant apple seed, what's coming up? If you plant pineapple seed, what's coming up? Okay, if you plant corn, what's coming up? Corn. So you reap what you sow, and you reap in proportion to what you sow. And so David, for about 16 months, has been sowing flesh. He's been sowing self-exertion. He's been sowing leaning to his own understanding. He's been sowing material prosperity while there is nothing going on spiritually. As a matter of fact, if you read the verses previous that describe this time in David's life, you don't find him praying one time. He's not talking to God. He is the picture of a man that's leading his own life. And then you have these unforeseen events that take place in verses 1 and 2. Let me just read them again. It says, when David and his men, they came back to Ziklag on the third day. That was when they were preparing for a war. They got kicked out of the other army, and they're going back home. And while they were gone, the Amalekites had made a raid against that area, and specifically against Ziklag. And so they had overcome Ziklag, burned it with fire, taken captives, the women and all who were in it, small and great. And the Bible writer adds the footnote, they killed nobody, but they carried them off and went on their way. So here's the picture. While David and his group, the mightiest men out of everybody that lived in Ziklag, they're going on one of these mercenary raids. And while they're there and they're getting ready for the next battle, the foreign king says, hey, some of our guys don't trust y'all. You're not really among us. Y'all are Hebrews, and we're actually going up into Hebrew territory, and we're not really convinced that you're actually loyal to us. So why don't you go back home to Ziklag? We don't want you fighting in this fight. And David's like, I want to fight. And they're like, no, we're not going to have you. And so they send him back home. But the problem is in the 3-day journey from Ziklag to the battle site, from the battle site back, the Amalekites had come and found Ziklag undefended. All of David's men and David are gone. So it's just the women and the kids and the dudes who are too young to fight. And so the Amalekites, which are some really terrible human beings, they come up there and they find an undefended city that is loaded with all the spoils of these previous wars, got these beautiful women, got these little kids that they can turn into slaves, and they're thinking, jackpot. So they're not going to kill anybody. But I mean, I don't want to provoke our flesh, but these are really, really bad men. They've got unprotected women. They're living in a barbaric society where men are known for treating women for one thing and one thing only. So it's got the worst possible case scenario. And so they're taking everybody out, and David comes back home and he sees the smoke rising from hundreds of yards away. The men begin to run there. They get there. The whole city is burned completely out. Everywhere they've been living, all of their stuff is gone. Their wives are gone. Their children are gone. And there's not a single reason why David, especially in a backslidden state where he's not in fellowship with the Lord, there's not a single reason why David should have any optimistic hope whatsoever. That's where David's self-made life had brought him. It had all crumbled in a 3-day period. And so, verse number 3, when they came to the city, they found it burned with fire. Their wives and sons and their daughters were taken captive. I'm just going to pause here because sometimes we make the mistake of reading the Bible too quickly. Just linger there. Brothers, linger there for a minute. You went out to do what you're supposed to do with a band of your brothers. You come back and somebody's got your wife and kids. And there's no media. There's no GPS. There's elementary, ancient ways of tracking, but you have no idea which way to turn, and they've got your wife, and they've got your son, and they've got your daughter. And they got everything that belongs to you. All you got is the clothes on your back. That's the scene that David was stepping into, reaping what he had sown. And if you're familiar at all with what it means to go through a season where you haven't been tight with the Lord and then things turn sour, in those moments, all of your sins accuse you. I mean, it's not only the external weight of all the garbage that you're now looking at, the smoke, the burned out stuff, the absent, the men around you are crying, but it's internally the accuser is saying, this is all because of you. God has abandoned you. You're never going to be restored. You've lost it all. You've sinned your way to the place where God has let you go forever. And so all of that stuff could be in play. And then, I'm sorry to make a bad moment worse, verses 4 and 5, just reveal the desperate atmosphere. It says, David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept. Now, these are not wimpy men. These are they're Delta Force, man. These guys are intense, and they're weeping and raising their voice and lamenting until the Bible says they had no more strength to weep. They cried themselves dry of tears, and David now recognizes that his 2 wives, y'all just let the Bible say what it says. It's a different time period, different generation, different culture, and David had 2 wives, and both of them had been taken captive, and so it's settling in. And this all happened in the place where David had led all these people, he had rallied all these people, he had helped them build a life for themselves. Everything had looked good up until this time period, but David was now reaping what he had sown. Now, a quick word before moving on. God is faithful to his kids, and part of that faithfulness is blessing. Part of that faithfulness is bounty. I believe there are seasons where part of that faithfulness is prosperity. I believe that there are birthrights attached to our standing in Jesus Christ that we have, that people outside of Christ have no ability to access. Listen, your relationship with Jesus and the beauty of it doesn't start when you go to heaven. It starts right now. Starts the moment you receive him. So I'm not waiting for the Christian life to be awesome when I get to heaven. I'm saying, no, I believe God initiated the process and wants to bless us now. I want to see the goodness of God in the land of the living. And so when all of this has crumbled down and these men are beginning to weep, but if you've ever been in a season like that before, I want you to know part of the goodness of God, part of the faithfulness of God, part of the blessing of God is his refusal to bless what he didn't build. And so he'll let us build some stuff outside of his will. He will. I've done it. He'll let us amass some things and build some things and do some things and figure out some things. He'll let us do it. But when his timing comes and he's ready to bring us closer to himself and he's ready to bring us out of what we've built for ourselves, sometimes he will do to what looks like to either shallow Christians or non-believers, it looks mean, it looks bad, it looks rough. What does he do? He just blows on it. And it's flattened. And again, we would tend to think of that as big, mean, angry God just punished me. But as you grow in the faith, what you can do is you get retrospect and you look back and you actually see, no, he tore down what I had built up, but I'm so glad he did, because if he hadn't, I'd still be building it up, and I wouldn't be walking in closeness to him like I am now. And so you literally have to learn that there's an exchange that goes on. Sometimes we have to let loose of the things we've built in our own strength, in our own name, for our own purposes, for our own pleasure, absent-minded of God. And when those things are removed or diluted or lessened, we find this place where we're like, okay, you've got my attention. What do you want from me? And that's where the encounter comes that leads to restoration. Stick with me and I'll prove it through the scriptures, because some of y'all are looking like, I don't know about all this, bro. Well, let's go a little bit further. Because this was the moment where David returns to his gracious God. He had reaped what he had sown, but now David is going to return to his gracious God. 16 months is a long time to be out of the will of God. It's a long time. Like 15 minutes is rough. 16 months is a really, really difficult season. And so what ends up happening to David, as it does with a lot of people when they've stepped out of the will of God and stayed there, and God determines that season's coming to an end, David found himself utterly alone. Beginning of verse 6. It says, David was greatly distressed. Why? Because his own people, his own men, spoke of stoning him. Because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. So now, what's going on the outside has gotten deeply on the inside, and as these men have run out of their tears, this is what dudes do, by the way. Hurt men typically, most of the angry men you know in your life are not primarily angry, they're primarily sad or hurt. But men don't like being sad or hurt. We don't like that vibe. And so what do? We portray our sadness through anger. And so now these guys that are brokenhearted, they're just looking, they want to kill something. And David happens to be the guy that is going to be the object of their hostility. And so they're thinking to themselves, hey, you brought us out here. Hey, you took us away from the place of God's blessing and the presence of God. We're not in Jerusalem. We're out here with you. We listened to you. We followed you. We did what you said. You're our leader. And now look around. My home is gone. My stuff is gone. And more importantly, my wife is gone. And my kids are gone. And I'll probably never see them again. And that's multiplied 400 times through all of David's men. And so they start looking for rocks. And they're about to execute David. And the Bible says David was greatly distressed. You think? It's actually an interesting Hebrew phrase. And I would say, if I had to put it in modern terms, because greatly distressed, and that reads very Shakespearean, I would say it this way: David was rocked to his core. He was trembling. And there's nothing he can do. Very quickly before moving on, because here's just a pastoral nugget. When people are grieving, they say illogical things and they do illogical things, and they respond in ways that they normally wouldn't respond. And so you're going to have some grieving people in your life from time to time, and they're going to act in ways that you're like, that it can be offensive, it can be scary, it can be disheartening. And I would just encourage you, when you know the context for what they're dealing with is deep, deep grief, give them some grace. Give them some grace. When you're around somebody who's experienced heartbreak and all you're trying to do is help, and they reject that help, or they lash out, or they act in a way, just understand it's not that you're doing something wrong, it's just that they're processing something that's overwhelming. And that's what was happening with David. So there he is. He's all by himself now. I mean, like, he is utterly alone. He's surrounded. The closest people to him want to kill him. The people that he longs to be with, he doesn't know where they are. And so what does David do? Well, David reconnects with who he is as a man after God's own heart. David's like, I need the Lord. I need Yahweh. I need the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I need that covenant-keeping God who hasn't heard my voice in a long 16 months, but I know him. And I know he's faithful, and I know he's merciful, and I know he loves me, and I know he's kind, and I know that his ear is bent towards the broken in spirit and the contrite in heart. And so what does David do? Verse number 6, it says he strengthened himself in the Lord his God. So David took the initiative. David, in the midst of hostility, I don't know exactly how it played out. Your sanctified imagination can picture it just as well as mine can. This is how I picture it. I picture David looking at the rockers who are about to be rocking and rolling on him, and I see him doing that. I see him dropping to his knees right there. And David is a poet, he's a warrior, but he's also a songwriter, he's a singer, he's a musician. And I just picture David getting in the spirit real quick and just praying. If I'm gonna go out, Lord, if they're gonna kill me, I'm gonna go out worshiping. I'm not gonna go out backslidden. So Lord, I'm gonna strengthen myself in you. I'm gonna encourage myself in you. I'm gonna stop right here and I'm gonna say, Lord, I've lost it all, but I know you won't lose me. And Lord, I am turning to you in this moment. It's a great thing to do when you've blown it, by the way. I mean, come on, most of us in the room we've lived a little while. And you can react a lot of different ways in a situation where you've blown it. You can try to defend yourself. You can try to reframe it, repackage it, convince yourself it's not as bad as it is. You can try to do the blame game and say, I'm jacked up right now because it's somebody else's fault. Or you can do what David did and just say, God, I need you right now. I have blown it. I need some encouragement. I need to strengthen myself in your presence right now. And he pressed in for worship. And here's something. Let's pretend we don't have the rest of the story, and let me just tell you, it worked. It worked. That little Hebrew phrase translated in my English Standard Version Bible as strengthened is a beautiful word, and it means to receive courage. It means to become stabilized. It means to, in other places it's translated, to prevail over something. And then my favorite translation of this word is to lay hold of. So can we amplify it for a moment? While David's being threatened with death, while he's lost everything, he takes a moment and he gets in the presence of God and he immediately begins to receive courage. He immediately begins to sense that he's being stabilized by the presence of God. He immediately enters into prevailing. He's going to begin to win right here in this moment. It didn't take 6 weeks of probation reporting. It didn't take 1,000 pledges to do better next time. It's just, God, here I am. I need you. I know you're merciful. Here I am. I've blown it. I am going to call on you right now. And as soon as he does, the inspired account says that he began to prevail. But I like the best phrase to me is, he laid hold of God. Now, I understand for all my theologically astute friends in the room, well, Jeff, actually, we don't lay hold on God. God lays hold on us. All right, whatever. But God in that moment had laid hold on David, and David in turn clung to God. I don't think it'd be too much of a stretch to say David reconnected with God, or David found the God that he had wandered from for so long. I want to encourage somebody, because I don't know where anybody is in the room, and this message will be through media streams later, and more people will hear it out there than they're hearing it in here. And so more than likely, there's people that are either in a backslidden state or have come out of a backslidden state, and you're wondering, what is God going to do with you? How's he going to respond to you? Can you count on him to be merciful? Can you count on him to be gracious? Or do you need to do something to earn his attention and favor and to make yourself feel secure? You're going to be a good girl. You're going to be a good boy. And you're going to try real hard. And Lord, I'm going to do this, this, and this if you'll do this. I would really encourage you just to lay it all before the Lord and just go ahead and say, God, I'm bankrupt. I've got nothing you need, but I need you. And just trust him to be God and to move into that moment. I actually think the Lord's way more attracted to that broken, ridiculously empty confession that we have nothing, we got nothing to bargain with. I think he loves that a whole lot more than us saying, well, if you do this, I'll do these 5 things. And so David just encourages himself, and in that moment he lays hold of the Lord. Now, let me read some verses that we really didn't read. So again, we're talking about him returning back to his gracious God through humbling himself in God's presence and having that. It's not detailed. We don't know what the encounter was, but we know David had an encounter because he began to be strengthened by whatever that connection was with God in that moment. And so then David begins to get his spiritual wits back. Because in that moment of being strengthened, verse number 7, it's like we see the real David stand back up. David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David, and David inquired of the Lord. So David's starting to pray again. Shall I pursue after this band? Shall I overtake them? He answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue. So David set out, and the 600 men, I kept saying 400, it was 400 later, but 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook Besor, where those who were left behind stayed. All right, real quick here. So we don't talk about the ephod very often, but there was in the Levitical law, the priestly garments, there was it was a garment that the priest would wear in front of his chest, and in one of the pockets, they would have this thing called the Urim and the Thummim. If you're having twins in upcoming years, there's two names for your twin boys. They had the Urim and the Thummim, and basically they would be archaic, somewhat like dice. They were sanctioned by God to help discern the will of the Lord, and when they were used in the proper way, God often communicated his yes or no answers through them. And so immediately, I love this, David has gotten reconnected to the Lord. David is hearing the Lord, and it's like he stands up a different man. He stands up and he's thinking priestly. He's like, bring me the priest, bring me the ephod. We need to know the will of the Lord. We need to hear from the Lord. Now, why is that important? Well, I'm just going to tell you from a human standpoint. Remember, David's been leaning to his own understanding for months and months. His flesh is trained in reacting. But in this moment, he's like, nope, I'm not going to react. Do you know how hard it would be as a man to take the time to pray and wait on the Lord, where every second is crucial as these marauders have taken your wife and children, doing the Lord knows what to them? And David is just like, no, we need to hear the voice of the Lord more than we need to operate in our instincts and strength. Bring me the priest, bring me the ephod, bring me the Urim and Thummim, and let's ask God what God wants to do. And I love David's humility. David doesn't say, all right, Lord, what weapons do we take as we go? David's so broken and humble, he says, do we go, Lord? Lord, is there any point in going? Lord, if you tell me to stay, I'll stay. Lord, you tell me to go, I'll go. But Lord, I don't want to move another moment without your presence in my life. That's one of the beauties of God tearing down what we've built up in our flesh. Guys, I know it's hard. I really actually feel a little bit of prophetic weight on this right now, because the last thing any of us want to do is explore the possibility that we might have experienced or are experiencing the gracious hand of God bringing down something we've worked hard to build up. And I wish I could tell you, if I had one-on-one time with you, I could tell you 3 instances in my Christian journey over the last 27 years where I know that God put his finger on something that I'd built. And actually, these were things I tried to do for him. But he put his finger on it and said, no, that's actually not me. I never asked you to do that. But Lord, I did it. Can you bless it? He's like, no. Because if I bless it, you'll believe that whatever you do for me out of your own understanding, I'm obligated to bless in the future. And so I've watched the Lord take down what I've built up. And listen, at the time I was like, please. And the Lord's like, no, Jeff, you're going to understand why later. And now I do. And here's the beauty. You think before you build again. You think before you launch out again. You pray and you wait on the Lord, and you get this thing called seasoning on you and maturity on you. I'm not fully mature. I don't have to tell you that, but I'm more mature than I was back in the day when the finger of God had to come against things that I'd built up in my own strength. And so David is now at a place and he's like, Lord, I just want you with me. If you tell us to run, we'll run. We'll go after these guys, and if you don't, we'll wait with you. So let's get down into these verses that I didn't read, because the story actually gets pretty cool. So in verses 10 through 17, which we didn't read initially, David begins again to fight the Lord's battles. Remember, David has been fighting in agreement with a pagan king. David's skill set that God gave him, David had been using for this pagan king to earn money basically against the law of God as a mercenary. And David's been just he's just using all his military and fighting skill and wisdom and strategy, and he's doing it to make a bunch of stuff for himself, consumables. And now David is going to start fighting the Lord's battles again. David didn't have to lose his strengths and his giftings and his wisdom and all of that stuff, but David needed to be reoriented to fight the right battles. Some of y'all, by the way, I just want to share this, some of y'all are born fighters. And, one of the things that I'm hoping for is that in the future of the church, that, especially the church in America, will stop trying to domesticate our warriors. Stop that. Some people are born to be intense fighters. Some people are not meant to, sing in a men's quartet wearing the same suit as the guy, 3 guys standing next to him. There's nothing wrong with that, but what I'm saying is, some guys are actually never supposed to have a nice, neat, tidy platform ministry. Some women are not to be that. Some women, they may be able to bake a casserole, but they also are called to do something in addition to doing domesticated stuff. And while I'm at it, I'll just go ahead and push against the tide of popular culture. The feminization of the American male is killing the church. That men are neutered, man, and it's like if a man is a man, and he's not a super sweet ponytail guy. If you have a ponytail, that's not about you. That was a line from a movie from a long time ago. But, Mr. Sensitive Ponytail, know my heart guy, in the moment, I love you. There's a reason why romance novels are in the fiction section. Why? Because that dude doesn't exist. He doesn't exist. All you women, you're waiting for that dude. I'm like, no, he's made up. And most of those books are written by women. You got me, Rick? You got me? You got me, all right. My point being this, listen, David's a warrior. It's not wrong to fight battles. It's not wrong to be masculine. It's not wrong to be a warrior. It's not wrong to act and operate in the instincts that are native to your gender. And listen, women, you don't have to be masculine to be strong. That's the other myth in America. I don't know how this got into a gender counseling conversation, but it's not like, okay, women want to be strong because they don't want to be doormats. And so in order to be strong, women feel like they have to become like men. So femininity is lost, and then men, in order to be sweet and understanding and kind and everything, they have to become feminized. That's the myth. That's the devil. And so keep plowing into your gender. Avoid the weaknesses of it, but don't avoid the strengths of it. I want my son to be a man. I don't want my son to be less than that. I don't want my daughter to be strutting around all bowed up, come on, bring it, That's crazy. Sorry, Alicia. She's not even looking up. She's like, please move on, Dad. My point being is this. David wasn't wrong for being a warrior. He was just fighting the wrong battles for a while. We got to channel our God-given instincts into what the Lord is doing. And so David finds favor with God. So God says, pursue. And so verse 10, these will be up on the screen. David pursued, he and 400 men. Now, as they're pursuing, verse 11 is interesting. They found an Egyptian in the open country, and they brought him to David. And they gave him bread, and he ate. And they gave him water to drink. Verse 15. And David said to him, will you take me down to this band? Will you take me to the Amalekites? And the young Egyptian said, swear to me by God that you will not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this band. You can go back and read these verses in their entirety later, but let me tell you what happened. So David gets instructions from God to go and pursue the band. The problem is they don't know where the Amalekites went with their wives and kids. And so they just launch off into the best direction they think of. They probably saw some tracks. They're heading that way. And as they're going, there's this little Egyptian slave guy. The Amalekites had taken this Egyptian to be their slave, and the slave had gotten sick. He had been fighting. They're out in the desert. He was weak. He was sick. And so the Amalekites, who have no regard for human life, they literally we don't need this guy. Let him die out here in the wilderness. He's just overhead. We don't need to bring him with us. We got tons of people now. We just robbed this whole city. We don't need this dude. Leave him out here. So he's out there dying. He's the only person in probably 100 square miles that knows where the Amalekites' camp is. And they leave him there for David to find. And God keeps that little Egyptian guy alive. David's men nurse him back to strength. They give him water, and they ask him a question. They say, who are you and why are you out here? And the guy says, I'm a slave. He says, the Amalekites owned me. They forced me. They conscripted me to fight in their army. We've been up, and we've been doing raids. And somebody says, where was the last place you raided? He goes, man, we were at this place called Ziklag. And we burned the whole city down. We took everybody captive, and they just left me out here to die. And David says, why don't you take me to your base camp? Why don't you take me to my wife? Why don't you take me to my kids? And the Egyptian guy, he's smart, man. He's smart. He goes like, I will if you won't kill me. If you won't kill me, I'm happily going to do it. David's probably thinking, if you don't do it, I'm going to kill you, so you better do it. So it was an agreement. And so that's exactly what happened. Now, why do I point that out? Because when we come out of our backsliddenness, when we encounter God in his mercy, when we start asking God what he wants and what he's doing in our lives, when it becomes important to us again to listen to the Lord and follow him, he has all sorts of unforeseen resources waiting out there in the desert for you just at the time you're going to need it. There's only one person on planet Earth in that area that could have helped David find the pit. And God just said, I'm going to deposit them right there in your pathway. That's favor. Some of you are afraid. Listen, this is not accusatory. It's exhortation. Some of you are afraid to walk in the best direction that God's given you because you want to know the resources are there now. You want to see them, and then you'll do what you feel like God wants you to do. You want to see sometimes you don't see the resources until you go. Sometimes you can't find what God's got planted out there for you until you go ahead and make the decision to do it. And that's what David was learning. And so then in verse number 16, it says, the Egyptian had taken David down, took him to the camp, and the Amalekites were spread abroad over all the land. And they're eating, and they're drinking, and they're dancing because of the great spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. So just very quickly here, this is wickedness doing what wickedness does, prematurely celebrating. That's what the wicked realm does. The wicked realm is always laughing it up and living it up and plundering and stealing and killing and destroying. And if you look at the world today, most of the wicked that are really successful in their wickedness, they give an appearance of having the time of their lives. Because they can fund what makes them happy, they can find what makes them happy, they can be fueled by what makes them happy. And if you look at them on Instagram or on the television or on the news feeds or on wherever you might see them, they look like they're having the time of their lives. And it's really sad because a lot of Christians say, I want that kind of life. Man, they look like they're having it made. Well, let me just tell you, if they're enjoying themselves, it's going to be short-lived and they're doing it prematurely, because just over the ledge is the eyes of the king looking at them saying, your time's short. And that's what was happening. So David is letting them get drunk all night long. And they're dancing. And listen, these are really bad guys. And remember, David's wives and all these guys' wives are down there in the camp. So you've got these terrible men, alcohol flowing. These women and kids are captive. It's not going to be a good scene. And David's just up there. He's like, not yet, fellas. Let them get as drunk as they can, because that's going to serve us. And so verse number 17, David and his 400 men come over the ridge, come down to the camp, and it says, David struck them down from twilight until the evening of the next day. Not a man of them escaped except for 400 young men who mounted camels and fled. So here's the beauty of it. David lets them have their premature celebration, and he's just up there strategizing. And from his elevated view, he's like, okay, we're going to send 20 men over here. I want you guys to circumvent. I want you to come around the back way. I'm going to send 40 of you guys over here. 100 of us are going to go straight down. And guys, when I blow the horn, everybody take off. And so they're coming against men that are armed with, Jack Daniels bottles and blunts. I mean, that's basically what they're armed with down there. And David and his guys, some of y'all don't know what a blunt is. Okay, see me after the service. But and David's guys are coming hard down there, and they're killing them. But notice it takes a day. Real quick word. Just because you have God's favor on your life in a renewed season does not mean that you don't have to fight. Doesn't mean you don't have to put the work in. The enemy is not intimidated by us crawling out from the top of the hill saying, we see you. Sometimes you've got to go hard down the ridge and put your neck on the line and do the tough work. And so that's what David does, and he wins. And the Bible says, I always found this interesting. Not a man of them escaped except for 400. It's very interesting, and the best I can tell is what it speaks to is the enormity of the army that it took, that David killed. So if 400 is basically equated to barely anybody getting out of there, that means David and his men slaughtered the enemy. Now here's the end of it. This is the restoration. David reclaims what the enemy stole. And this is a word for some of you right now. God is bringing some of you into a season where you're going to get back what the enemy has taken from you. I'm not like a manipulator or a rah-rah speech guy. I don't have a bone of that in my body, but when I believe it, I say it firmly. Some of you are about to enter into a season. Joel, in his prophecy, spoke of it this way. The Lord is going to restore to you the years that the locust ate. It's when the enemy overplays his hand, over aggressively extends his boundaries into the territory that God's assigned to you, and sometimes it looks like the enemy wins. And I believe that I can say with all of my heart, for the church and for some of you that are in this room, this is the season where God is going to say, let's go get back what the enemy took from you. Some of y'all have lost people in your family to the world, and it looks like the world has won. And I'm telling you, if you will just go to fight, if you'll come over the ledge, and if you'll run down the hill in prayer, and if you'll contend in faith for their souls, you will be getting them back. I just prophesy that some of them are going to worship right here next to you. They're going to out-worship you. They're going to come out of the enemy camp, and they're going to shout, and they're going to sing, and you're going to look at them, and you're going to say, what's going to happen? And the person next to you is going to say, the Lord's restoring the years that the locust ate. You're getting back what the enemy stole. So what did it look like in David's life? Well, David reclaimed what he had lost. It says in verse number 18, I just love my Bible. David recovered all. David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken. It doesn't say he got most of it back. It says all of it was back. No wife died, no child died. And in addition to that, we're going to see in just a second that all the stuff that was taken was given back. That blows my mind, because what that is that's a restoration. All that stuff that David had gained by his own strength, God temporarily removed. Well, when David got reoriented with God, God said, good, now that you're looking at me, I'll give it all back to you. Yeah. So it was no longer what David had gotten for himself, is what every time David would look at it from that point forward, he'd say, God did that. God did that. Beforehand, David would be like, we did that. We did that. You see what we did? We got all this stuff. We did that. God said, oh, son, I can't let you live like that, so let me take it away from you. And David's like, oh, Lord, I need you, I need you, I need you. And so God restored to David. And David recovered all that the enemy, all the Amalekites had taken. And I like this. David gets a second chance with those whom he had failed. David rescued his 2 wives. Whew. Now listen. Most men will tell you, we are challenged to be the man we need to be with 1 wife. David got 2. My guess is they were happy to see David initially. My hero, my hero, my hero, Daddy. And then as they're walking home, one of them starts thinking, I can't believe you let this happen. And you know how it is, like, and immediately you're just relieved because the immediate danger is gone, and then you start thinking about it. And David got a second chance with Abigail and Ahinoam. He got a second chance at these women that, quite frankly, as a backslidden husband, he had failed. They had reaped what he had sown. Just very quickly here, when we're not walking with the Lord, it doesn't just affect us, it affects everybody around us. And it's a really beautiful mercy when God restores us, and he doesn't just give us a second chance, but he gives us a second chance to bless those that our foolishness impacted negatively. If you've got somebody in your life that was in a season and they blew it and it really negatively impacted you, I would just challenge you with this. You will grow to be so much like Jesus if you will welcome them in that second chance opportunity and give them the opportunity to make the most of it. I don't know that anybody needs a constant barrage of lectures to remind them of what they did back then. Most people just need that conversation, that unburdening one time, And then I'm going to tell you, it'll set somebody free if their life has messed you up, but you want to have that second chance moment. If you tell them, hey, this is what happened because of what you did, and it's a risk for me to be vulnerable to enter back into this with you, but I'm going to. I'm going to tell you, if you'll keep your eyes on the Lord, you and I will do this together. And David gets his 2 wives back, and then verse number 19, nothing was missing. Nothing was missing, whether small or great, sons or daughters, spoil, or anything that had been taken. David brought back all. That one encounter. And David lost it all, and David got it all back. But David got it all back in a way that he would never look at it the same. By the way, I'll give you this, because God does exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to what Paul said in Ephesians. If you read the rest of the chapter, David didn't just get back what the Amalekites stole from him. David got back everything that the Amalekites had been stealing from everybody. Because the Amalekites are dead. They're dead. Like, they got platinum credit cards with wide open, balances, and ain't nobody going to contest David swiping, because David earned it all by destroying the enemy. And so what I'm saying is this: David didn't just get back to ground zero. David hit the jackpot. Now, you do with that what you want, but this is what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to say, God, I think you're stretching me enough to believe that you don't just want me to get by. I'm not even just talking about material stuff. You can apply it to that, but I'm just thinking bigger than that. I'm just thinking, what did Jesus mean when he said it's the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom? To give us the kingdom. Fear not, little flock, it's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, is what Jesus said. And we're over here hunting and pecking for these tiny little things, or just to get back to ground zero. Friends, I just want to say this, and I'm done. Go ahead and believe that you're not on probation. Go ahead and let everybody else in your life off of probation. Because if you're not on probation, when you could be if God wanted to put you on it, but you're not on it, let's take each other off probation. Let's live in such a way that we are freely receiving and freely giving. And let's keep our focus on the one who says, stay in my presence, I'll give you an encounter, and it'll strengthen you. Anything that you've lost, I will give you back to an extent. You will receive from me in a way that you're no longer focused on what you've lost. You will be focused on my goodness and my grace to you. Will you stand to your feet?